Thank you, first of all. Thank you for coming along and do this. Very privileged to been able to get hold of you, and hope you're back to full health now.
I am. I feel great. Yeah. I was in New York yesterday and got in last night, but I've been on a normal travel schedule, so I'm good.
That's great. Good. Glad to hear. So what I've done is I've pulled down your LinkedIn profile, and I just thought I'd check with you, first of all, whether you're happy with that as your profile, and secondly, whether you would rather you did that introduction or I did.
Oh, that's fine if you do it. Yeah, I'd rather you do it. I don't really want to talk about myself. Yeah.
Excellent. That's great. So the sorts of questions I was going to ask, David, are talk us through about your background, but I guess if I've done that, probably don't need to do that bit.
The bio doesn't talk a lot about my agency background. If you want me to go into more detail about the
Sure.
agency transitions, I'm happy to do that.
That'd be good. Yeah. So I'll make that first question. Can you tell us more about your agency, how it started, how it finished, and what you did?
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got, I guess, quite an open question, but it's about why do so many agencies struggle?
Right.
Is that a fair question?
Yep, for sure. Yep. There are a few questions in here about HubSpot. Are you working with quite a few HubSpot agencies?
We've got a few, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a few, and we're getting more and more, definitely, yeah.
Okay, sure.
So yes, our client base is fundamentally agencies. So some of those will be specifically digital marketing agencies, and they might have partnered with a HubSpot or an Infusionsoft or whatever.
Okay.
And then we'll have, specialist SEO agencies or pay-per-click agencies, but then we'll have just creative agencies where they're not necessarily marketing, they're more brand and design.
Right.
And then we'll have development, digital agencies as well, just do development.
Okay.
So my next question then, after why do so many struggle, is what are the characteristics of successful agency owners, not just agencies, but of the people running the business?
Yeah, that'll be a great question. Yeah.
Okay. And then this idea about having a project-based business, that one of the challenges is that you're trying to find projects that fit with your team, because obviously you've built up a team and you've got a team that need feeding, and you've got a team that have certain skill sets. And if you've not got a retainer-based model and it's project-driven, the challenge of trying to find the right projects versus just getting projects in the door, and the challenge around that. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I've got some real, you and I may end up not necessarily having the same perspective on some things, which is fine. Like I've got some pretty strong points of view about retainers and, where they come from and why clients like them, why clients don't like them. So it'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to get that lighting a bit right. I can't see me on that side. Okay. What are the different characteristics and challenges of agencies at different stages in their life cycle? So, what are the trigger points and what are those focal points and ceilings that they reach as they grow? I've heard you speak on other interviews about the importance of finding a differentiator deeper than just we're a HubSpot agency. You're saying that when it comes down to how easy it comes down to how easily you can be substituted as an agency.
Right. Yeah, I can talk about that general concept, like that I developed this notion of the distributed control and how that relates to positioning for sure. And then we can talk about some specific ways they could think about positioning themselves.
Brilliant. Okay. You want about getting tied to HubSpot. Don't get lazy, chart your own path. How does an agency go about that? On pricing, you mentioned the person setting the price needs to be someone who's objective. It can't be the same people servicing the clients. Just talk us through that.
Yep.
How do you define a thriving agency? I think it's a really good question.
Yep, for sure.
Because, from my perspective, it's profit, but there's more to a thriving agency than profit. So, and where can people connect or learn more about you?
Okay.
Finish up. So,
yep. Sounds good.
Try to make it, not too many questions that we can go fairly deep into each one. I'm not restricted on time. So I'm kind of happy just to see how it goes and how it feels, and for you to dictate how much you want to go into things and how long you want it to go.
Okay. Sounds good.
Right. And then what we'll do is we'll get this edited afterwards to obviously start it from when I say in a minute or two. And then we can send it over to you to review if you want, or if you just know that you're happy with it.
No, I don't need to. Yeah. No, I don't need to review it.
Yeah, then we'll just push it out.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, David, thank you for this. All right. So we're all recording. Wonderful. So hello everybody, and welcome to this session that I'm delighted to be able to run. Today we've got David Baker, and I first heard about David when it was a client actually that had found his digital book on how to sort of financial management for a marketing firm, which I read, and I was very intrigued. Obviously it was a topic that's very close to my heart, and I started more digging and realized that David was ill and they'd written several books, and I'm now working my way reading through them, and I thought I'd be cheeky and reach out and see whether there's any chance of getting him on an interview, and I was very privileged that he agreed to do that. So we've got a great guest speaker here today, and you're going to really enjoy this session. So background about David: he owned a marketing communications firm for 6 years before he started his management consulting firm ReCourses. So you can find more about ReCourses on ReCourses.com. We'll share the link for that. He focuses on helping entrepreneurial experts make better decisions through the writing that he does, the speaking, and the coaching and advice as well. So he's written 5 very well received books, and he typically speaks at 30 to 35 conferences a year, and has done in-depth consulting with over 900 firms. His work has been discussed in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Fast Company, Inc. Magazine, Forbes, Marketing Professionals, Business Week, and CBS. Spoken at multiple TEDx events, and is on the advisory board for the Graduate Design for Social Innovation program in New York City. His hobbies are teaching motorcycle racing with the Superbike School out of California, photography all over the world, 30 plus countries so far, flying airplanes and helicopters. So that's David. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Good to be here. I was just in your country not too long ago doing a live podcast session with Blair Enns, my podcast partner. It was really fun. I love the UK, so it's really good to speak with you.
That's great. I'm gutted I missed that. Whereabouts in the UK were you?
We were in southeast London, and we had people come in from several hours away, and we did a live Q&A to record the podcast. It was really fun. Yeah, it was great. Brilliant. I took a train trip to Oxford the day before, one of my favorite cities. I just, I don't know why, I didn't go there to see anybody. I just like to take train trips to Oxford.
Nice, that's lovely. Yeah, I've listened to a lot of yours and Blair's shared podcasts. They're great, really, really good. So I've talked a little bit there about your background. Most of the audience today will be clients and contacts of ours at My Accounts Place. They'll tend to be agency owners. Could we just go into a little bit of detail about the agency that you ran, what you did, sure. How long you did it, and what happened in the end?
Yeah, sure. It's not a terribly flattering story, honestly. I was going through grad school, had 2 kids at the time, married, two kids, working full time I was managing a bookseller. I had started as a typesetter. That was kind of my interest in the marketing field, and then rose up the ranks and became head of marketing eventually. And about halfway through my graduate school program, I was on the couch one day and I was thinking about how I all of a sudden was not interested in academia. I had been quite a bit. And it was mainly because of all the political nonsense inside academia. So I decided I would do something else. I didn't know what it was. I thought, oh, how hard could this be? Maybe I'll just start a marketing firm, because the barrier to entry is so low, which we all know now, right? Anybody can do it, which made it obvious that maybe I could do it if anybody could do it. So I did that, and we slowly grew. We got up to about 16 people at one point, and it was a slow growth over about 16 years. And we focused on higher ed clients mainly. We had some other clients as well. I didn't understand a lot of what was happening in that world. I was just scrambling on my own. But it went pretty well, frankly. And about 9 months before that ended, I called somebody at creativebusiness.com, Cam Foote, and he was writing a publication. And I said, Cam, why don't you give advice to agency owners? You've got a great newsletter that's for them. And he said he wasn't interested for various reasons, but he said, if you want to do it, that would be fine. So before I could even think about it, because that's not what had been on my mind, I thought, well, what can I lose? And he said, I'll put an ad in the publication, and then if you get any work from it, just give me 10%. And so I did that, and clients started to call they were peers at the time, really, and it took over my life very quickly. We at the time too, the agency was struggling with a client concentration problem, and there'd been some embezzling on the client side. And so it was a good time for me really to refocus, kind of spin the agency off, give the accounts to two of the employees there. So that was, it wasn't like a really proud beginning. It was just one of those things that happened. And I was drinking from a fire hose, frankly. I didn't know, I wasn't advising other agencies because I was some amazing agency owner. That just simply wasn't true. I was a pretty average agency owner, but I learned very quickly working with a new agency almost at the outset every week. And so that was almost 24 years ago. And so I've been doing that for all that time. I work by myself out of Nashville, work worldwide. So it came from a little bit of experience running an agency, but really what I'm bringing to the table is more learning from other agency owners.
That's great. That's excellent. And of all the agencies that you've worked with, I would imagine, obviously, there's been some very good ones and there's been some not so good ones.
Right.
And also perhaps some that look good on the outside, but they've not been able to last the pace for one reason or another.
Right.
Why is that in your view? You know, as I say, there's lots of agencies that look like they're the real deal, but they don't make it. Why do so many agencies struggle?
I think maybe because so many of them got into the business sort of like I did, thinking it was easy, right? And they didn't really, they thought that it was about being a great craft person or a great tech or knowledge person, and they didn't understand the role of making great business decisions. And that's really been my life's work, is helping these principals make better business decisions, because I've just felt for so many years now, you look around your town and you look at the firms and you look at the ones that are still churning away and doing okay, and then you look at the ones that left, they went out of business for whatever reason. I've never seen much connection between the quality of their work and their staying power. Like, we'd like to think that if our work is so good, it will cover up any of the bad business decisions we make, or even more grossly than that, it's like if our work is really good, we don't even have to have a strong positioning or a strong lead generation plan, because it'll take care of itself. It's like marketing is for little people that aren't really as good as we are. So I think it comes down to not making great business decisions. Things as mundane as borrowing too much money, or not understanding that their own role as the principal needs to change over time, or not hiring the right people to maintain profitability, or not crafting their positioning. So it has very little to do with the quality of their work. It has more to do with the quality of their business decisions. That's my life's work.
Excellent. That's really good. And something that I see a lot, and I guess because I've been advising agency owners for so long, I've lost grasp of how much of this is an agency issue versus just any other business issue.
Oh, yeah.
But I find them vastly under-resourced from an advisory perspective.
Right.
So, you know,
why do you think that is? Why do you think they're not listening to advice quite as much? What does that come from?
Yeah, I do sympathise in a way. I've been thinking about this quite a lot, but I think often it's because they've been scarred by experiences in the past. So maybe they've hired in a coach or a consultant that, you know, several £1,000s a month. It's been very expensive, and they weren't all they made out to be. In my view, there are a lot more bad advisors out there than there are good.
Yeah,
There are some incredible, brilliant advisors, but there are lots that are not, and so they've had experiences before, or they've spoken to someone else who's had bad experiences. So I think that's part of the reason. I think, and the other reason, which is kind of connected, is that coaches or consultants maybe want to jump in too soon and expect you to make a decision about working with them. And when I've decided to work with consultants myself on my business, we've had 5, 6, 7 meetings before we've decided to go ahead. And I already had a very high level of assurance about what working together is going to look like, because we've already had a taste of it.
Yeah, and I think individual principals have certain expectations, and it's up to me as an advisor to make sure I'm a good fit and I'm going to deliver value, because I cannot deliver value to most of the principals out there. That's just a fact, because my style is very unique in that I'm not an effective coach. I'm more of an advisor. I don't hold my clients' hands. I don't guide them every week and bug them to see if they're doing the job. Most of the principals out there, I think, need more that style. And I've tried to turn myself into that kind of a consultant, and I've never been successful at doing it. It frustrates me. It frustrates them. So I've tried to be a lot more honest recently, which means I lose work, which is fine. I'd rather find out early on that it's not a good fit. I think one mistake that agency owners make is they hire advisors who don't know their industry. And so it's just somebody's known or whatever. And there are some unique things about this industry. So that's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So on the reverse then, what are the characteristics of the successful agencies? But I want to focus on the leaders in particular. So the leaders of these agencies, the founders, the people that are running these agencies, what is it about them that makes their agencies successful?
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, isn't it? And I would never have been able to answer that question except that I stumbled across something by accident. I was doing a bunch of research on personality profiles, and I had started with a sample size of 13,000 employees in the field. Each of those 13,000 employees had a personality profile done, a 24-question qualitative, quantitative survey, and I spent 30 minutes with each of those people individually over many years. So those 3 parts. And what I wasn't looking for is whether there were any characteristics that were unique to the actual principals of those firms. But of course, those principals were included in the mix. There were 1,340 of that smaller group. So I began running those results through SPSS, which is a statistical analysis program. And the one thing that came up that was common, it was found with every principal except for 4 of them. In other words, every successful principal had one personality characteristic, except there were 4 exceptions to it. And that characteristic was that they were risk takers. So now, because they're risk takers, they're obviously not going to get everything right. So being a successful entrepreneur does not mean you're going to make all the right decisions. It does mean that you're going to make a lot of decisions, and many of them are going to be right. So what you find is that principals who play it safe, who don't make those decisions, who are afraid of risk, do not succeed. And they can one way they can kind of, I guess, account for that is that they could be partners, like equal partners with somebody who is a risk taker, and that the agency can still move forward pretty well. So that's one characteristic for sure. They're a risk taker. Another characteristic would be that they know how to manage money. And now there are really different profiles there. Like there's some folks who are very comfortable with more debt than others, but they understand how their business is running and they understand the implications of certain financial decisions. Those are the only two I can think of, honestly. It has
Mm.
nothing to do with the quality of the work that they do, and the answer changes a little bit as the agency gets bigger, because they, if you're a control freak, you can get away with that in a smaller agency. But if you're a 20-person firm and a control freak, you're going to drive yourself and everybody else nuts. So certain things become more important as the agency is bigger, like your particular management style. But those are the two big things: their ability to take risks and their ability to understand the finances, which is the finances is kind of a big part of what you help them with, right?
But a really important combination that as well, because you can't have somebody that's a risk taker but doesn't have control of money, because those risks could quickly put them out of business if they've not got an understanding of the financial implications. Whereas a good risk taker will say, well, I can afford to take a measured risk.
Yeah, and when that principal gives that risk-taking control of the money to somebody else, we have a disaster on our hands, because that person is making risky decisions with somebody else's money, and that doesn't work. It sometimes works well for 12, 18 months, and after that it becomes a race to the bottom. So there's a combination of risk-taking but still understanding it's my money, it's my butt on the line. And so that kind of keeps them from going too far off that risk. That risk.
It's one of the first things we tell new clients is that whilst we are here for you and we're going to help you to manage your finances better, what you can't do is abdicate responsibility for your finances to us, because your finances is your business. That's the health of your business, and what we'll do is help you to understand your finances and manage them better with us by your side. But no one can abdicate responsibility for your finances. The business owner needs to take responsibility for that ultimately.
Right, for sure. Yep.
Excellent. So one of the things you touched upon there, I'm just going to rejig the order a little bit here, because you talked about how things change during the life cycle of an agency. So different challenges at different stages of the growth of an agency. Could you just talk to us about maybe what those triggers, what those focal points are that as an agency becomes more established, the characteristics of the business and the challenges that they face start to change?
Sure. So I'd want to define what we mean by growth. So I'm not defining growth in terms of hitting specific financial targets. I'm understanding growth as like almost a stand-in for the number of people they have. So as they add people, they're growing. And there are some very specific boundaries there. So, and also in terms of years of business. So usually when somebody starts a firm, they have a few accounts that they're already with them, or they're going to go with them pretty easily. They're not usually starting from scratch. They're leaving some other place and taking some work with them, or they've been doing freelance work for a firm and they decide they're going to be a little more formal about everything. So anyway, those early leads that come fairly easily start to dry up at about 3.5 to 4.5 years. So that's one thing to think about. So you can get away with a sloppy positioning and undisciplined lead generation for those first few years. It's not a good idea to do it, but you probably could get away with it. Something else that changes is in the number of people. So when you add more than about 5 to 6 people per partner, so if we have a 2 equal partner firm, then that's 10 to 11 or 12 people. When you grow above that, there's more detail running through the place than can be housed in somebody's mind, and it starts to move a little bit out of control, because the principal has prided himself or herself on the fact that they know basically what's happening with each account. And above that number of people, they can no longer make that claim. And so they have to think differently. They have to hire different people that they trust who can manage those details. And they have to be grow comfortable in the idea that they don't know everything that's happening and that their role is different. Something else that changes is that principals need to give up specific tasks. There are 2 in particular specific tasks that they need to give up in order as the firm grows. One of those is understanding, like I was just talking about, the specific project management control tower kind of approach to the firm. That's what they give up first. The second thing they give up is managing any specific client management. So if I sat down with a client and said, with all of the agency's clients and said, who's your primary day-to-day person? None of those clients should give me the name of the principal. That's the test there of whether they've moved out of that role. So those are some of the roles that they need to give up in time. Clearly the biggest change that happens is, so at the beginning, you're a player when you don't have any employees. When you add some employees, you're a player coach. So you're still a player, largely a player, but you're still coaching the other people. And then you become just a coach. And that's one of the most difficult transitions for principals to make, because they get into this business with no training on how to manage other people, and they don't get out of bed in the morning and say to themselves, I can't wait to manage people. This is what drives me. But really, running a firm of a number of people means your primary job is to manage people. And what's really a mistake is to grow without embracing that role of managing people. It doesn't matter whether you want to manage people or not, and it doesn't matter how big you grow. It's a very innocuous sort of decision that you would make. What does matter is adding a lot of people and not also making a commitment to manage them. So again, we're talking about all these things as business decisions. They're right at the heart of what makes an agency really thrive or not.
Yeah, great. Sorry, just cut out a tiny little bit at the end there, David, but that's fine. That was great. That idea of you never built a business, you never started in business to manage people. There are business owners, I find. So sorry, more specifically, the idea of removing yourself from client work and managing people instead. Some business owners struggle with. But I actually think that there are another group of business owners that don't struggle with the idea of it. They are ready to move themselves away from client work. Maybe they're not even the best people for client work. There are now people better than them. But then what happens is they attempt to transition other people into account managing those clients, and it doesn't go well. So they end up reverting back, and that's why they never progress.
Right.
Do you therefore have any advice on those business owners who are daring enough and who are entrepreneurial, love to step up and rely on the people to manage the clients, but how you actually manage that transition? Because there's the communication with the client, obviously, and make sure that the client's happy with it, and then there's coaching that staff member and how they can take on that account, take on that responsibility, and make it a success.
Yeah, and that tension is particularly difficult at the beginning, because when the principal finally gets to the point where they're willing to hire somebody, they often don't have a lot of money. So they're hiring somebody who's not all that expensive and thus isn't all that experienced. And so here we have sort of this blank slate person, and that person is charged with learning how the principal would do it, which isn't necessarily the best way to do it. Sometimes those folks turn out to be fantastic account managers, and sometimes they don't. And then the principal's gotten to that point where they've resisted it, finally say, okay, I'll hire somebody. And then it doesn't work out, and that sort of reinforces their fears, and then they're afraid to do it again. But then the really smart ones decide to hire somebody that's more expensive, that's very experienced, that they can trust. And this person is better at managing accounts the first day they work there than the principal ever was. And the principal can actually learn about how to manage accounts from this new employee who's a little bit more expensive. So that's one of the most difficult transitions, is when you move from hiring somebody based on what you can afford to hiring somebody based on what you actually need. That's a very difficult transition to make. And I don't have any particular magical answer for that, but it's usually something somebody has to just struggle through, make some mistakes.
And a lot of it comes down to just awareness of the business owner to work out whether this person that they can do it maybe more cheaply, who's maybe come up organically, has got the ability to step up, and their awareness of deep down, do they think that person's got what it takes to?
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Great. So the next thing I want to ask is, so we've talked now, you just kind of gone through in a chronological order, I guess, but you started to take on your first team members, you've started to delegate responsibility, you've got your people now managing the accounts. One of the challenges that I find agencies have as they grow, particularly as they get to the £1 to £1.5 million barrier, is that they've started to grow quite a sizable team now. They might have 20, 30 people in the business, and there's therefore more pressure. There's more pressure to make sure that you meet payroll, more pressure to make sure that you bring in enough work to stay alive. But at the same time, you want to bring in the right work. And I guess what makes that an even bigger challenge is is the difficulty in finding retainer-based work. So you're having to go out and keep selling and keep winning work. How do you help your clients to balance being able to make sure that they can cover payroll and cover overhead versus winning the right work month on month? Because that can be quite stressful, can't it?
Yes. So that's one reason why there's a segment of our world that's pushing retainers so hard. I happen to not agree with that retainer push at all. Retainers are more common with PR firms, with SEO firms, and now with digital firms, particularly under the HubSpot umbrella. And I really disagree with the retainer model that HubSpot pushes. I think it's self-serving. I understand the benefit of it to the agency for sure, but I don't believe clients really love retainers, and when the relationship starts to go off the rails, it's very difficult to rescue it, very difficult to save it, because the client is viewing this as this monthly entitlement that the agency is getting, and they resent the fact that it's going every month, and the clients are more acutely aware of how they're being disappointed or their expectations are not being met, and they also are so much more demanding. They feel like they own the agency. So I'm not an advocate of retainers, even for HubSpot type agencies. And in the PR world, not so much SEO, but in the PR world, retainers have slowly been fading away more and more, and it's become more of a project basis. So it's difficult really, because I understand how it's easier to manage your firm with a retainer, but I don't think that's in the best interest of clients in some cases. What we're faced with at a larger level is these agencies that are trying to feed the machine. And once the firm is established, so this wouldn't be true for an earlier firm, but a firm that's established, like the one you described hypothetically, the biggest reason why they compromise, why they make bad business decisions, is this pressure to meet payroll. And that's why they water down their positioning. They may water down their commitment to hiring the right kind of people, whatever. And I think it's destructive. It comes from this notion that every time we get an opportunity, we need to say yes to it, and we need to find a way to serve these clients, because we never know when opportunity will come, and we need to grasp it whenever it happens. I firmly do not believe that. I think every new client you land, you should say to yourself, which client can we replace? Which client will this be better than who's currently on our roster? And then the next question you ask is, do we really want to grow? Do I want to move away from doing more towards managing over time? And if you do, fine, but never build your capacity to meet your opportunity. Your opportunity always needs to be greater than your capacity, or you lose this strength of being able to say no to your clients, which the ability to say no is what props prices higher. So I understand the pressure that comes from clients, but the solution is to say no more often, and to always leave yourself that wiggle room, so that if you have fewer opportunities, you're not all of a sudden forced into compromising. That's the thought.
Fantastic. Absolutely love it. I talk to our clients about this all the time, because obviously we're living proof of saying no. We only work with digital creative businesses. We won't work with anybody else, and people struggle to get their head around that concept and why you would restrict yourself. And I say, well, there's 500,000 digital creative businesses just in the UK. I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
And
right.
what's the opportunity for moving outside the industry. The size of our opportunity versus our capacity is significant, and we'll never fill it. So
right.
really, I think what happens with entrepreneurs is they get excited by this shiny opportunity without really thinking about whether it's actually going to improve their business or their fortunes, and if they could just stay disciplined. But again, I do feel that the reason that happens a lot of the times because they've not got an advisor or mentor around them who's got that experience, and they're reacting to the environment around them. And yeah, so that was good. So you talked a little bit about HubSpot there. I heard on one of your interviews recently you were talking about this danger that obviously HubSpot have been very successful over recent years in working with agencies and getting agencies to use them as their preferred partner. And you get a lot of agencies now where their value proposition, their tagline is that we're a HubSpot partner. And in the interview, you talked about the danger of that, because soon lots and lots of agencies are going to say they're a HubSpot partner. That's not going to that's not a unique differentiator, and it's important to go deeper with your value proposition. Could you just talk about, first of all, the danger of that, and then what you think is a better solution?
Well, as an expert firm, which is how you have to think of yourself, you never want to tie yourself to a particular platform. For one, the main reason is because somebody else now owns your positioning, and they could make a change in the marketplace, or something could happen out there. And we've all seen it occur. That's one of the big dangers of tying your positioning to a platform. The other is that you have all kinds of other people tying their agencies to a platform. And when I see all these folks out there calling themselves HubSpot agencies, I almost want to barf. Now, it's not because HubSpot isn't a good platform. It's a good platform. It's run by good people. They have an amazing support network. It really is a remarkable platform. I'm not criticizing the platform at all. What I'm criticizing is somehow thinking that being a HubSpot agency is something that should be used to differentiate you. So in my ideal world, a lot of agencies would be using HubSpot, but they'd also be using other platforms as well. So they would be using the one that makes the most sense for the client. And in most cases, HubSpot is a very good option. In other cases, it's a terrible option for a client. So they would be more agnostic on the platform. That's the first thing that would happen in my ideal world. Second thing is that they would never mention HubSpot anywhere on their website. I think that's a huge mistake. And I've worked with more than 40 HubSpot agencies now, and it's really fun to work with them. They're good people. They tend to be really smart, very aggressive. I like working with them a lot, but they find it very difficult to listen to that sort of difficult advice. And I've been around a long time. I've seen how this happens, and a lot of digital agencies on the HubSpot wagon, and they're going to be sorry at some point. Something's going to happen. And HubSpot is also here. The thing that's different about HubSpot that is not true of agencies using other platforms is that people are viewing HubSpot almost like a franchise opportunity. So they're not the same kind of entrepreneur that other agency owners are. They're looking for all kinds of advice. I think of them as on a train track as opposed to on an off-road four-wheel drive vehicle that can go anywhere. HubSpot agencies are on this train track, and the train track is defined by HubSpot, and the only choice they have is how fast they want to go on this track. But otherwise, their path is very prescribed. It's a straight line that doesn't move, and the only choice you have is speed. And I think that's very dangerous. And what it's attracted entrepreneurs who do not have the typical risk profile that other agency principals do. These are folks who, in many cases, want to be spoon-fed how they should be doing things. And HubSpot is not in the business of helping them succeed. They're very helpful in that way, and I don't think HubSpot owes them anything. This is not a bash HubSpot thing, but in the end, HubSpot doesn't honestly care all that much if an agency succeeds or fails. And for you looking to them to be, it's not like buying a McDonald's where, they tell you where to get the food, how to make it, all this stuff. That's not the kind of agency you should be running. So I'm a little HubSpot's been very good to me. They've had me speak at many of their conferences, and they've bought tons of copies of my books and given them away to their agencies. So I'm very grateful for HubSpot, and I think it's a fantastic product. My discouragement is how the agencies are using the product and not forging a path on their own.
Yeah, that's great. You're not saying not to use HubSpot. You're
No,
just
not
saying
at all.
to make your value proposition, we are HubSpot. And
right.
Yeah,
right.
I guess part of the confusion there, though, for agency owners is that they do want a bit of a train track, and they do want some guidance because business is so multifaceted, so complex.
Right.
Often it's the first time they've ever run a business before.
Right.
So what HubSpot are giving them is some prescribed that direction, I guess, some direction. So if not HubSpot or a platform, where do agency owners get that help? How do they get guided in terms of what direction they could be moving in and how to set that strategy?
Well, most of them get that advice from having worked at another agency before. And that becomes very difficult if you have somebody starting a HubSpot agency and that's their first agency. They just don't know how things are done. And they take everything they learn from HubSpot and other HubSpot agencies as gospel, and it's a mistake. That's the first place people learn. Otherwise, there are 30 or 40 really good advisors. I'm just one of those, that they can get a lot of great advice from people that have been doing this sort of thing for 60 years. I mean, not any single individual for that long, but there have been good advice providers on how to run a business in the agency world for 60 some years. And there are still 40 or so of those around, and you can look for them. In fact, I've got a list of them on my website. That's the safest place to get it, because HubSpot is not capable of giving you good advice about running your business. They can help you understand how to manage clients decently and so on, but they simply don't. I mean, they just don't know. And it's a mistake to think that they even they have the capacity to care about that. So it's not that they're bad people. They're really good people who do care, but that's not their job to help you run your agency better. Their interest is you still selling HubSpot installations, and they want you to succeed enough to do that. But succeeding even more than that is up to you, and that means finding advice givers other than that.
That's great. And an advisor can be as agile as they want to be. So
yeah,
they're going to set you on the right direction, but then they're working with you. They're there not on the front line day to day, but they're there helping you deal with whatever's coming up, and they're not just putting you back onto a track and this is here's the answer. You work out those answers together, and often the agency owners have the answers inside them. It's about unpicking it, isn't it?
Right.
Working it through together. Yeah, great. I'd like to ask you a question about pricing. This was another interview that I heard you talking about this really interesting concept that if you have the same person setting the price, so prices, price card, price rates, proposals, wherever you're talking about price, and if you have the same person setting the price for a prospect or a client as you do the same person that services the account, that can be a problem because you've got that I guess conflict of interest, and you've got those challenges going on in your head. Could you just talk to us a little bit about that and what your advice there is?
So if we have the person who's classically managing the client relationship, and that is the most difficult job in the firm for sure. It's not the most important, but it's the most difficult because they're charged with being an ambassador for the client and also doing what's in the best interest of the client. So it's almost like they have one foot firmly planted on both sides of the fence. And that's very difficult to do. And they are, in the end, they're usually driven by this need to keep the client happy. So their tendency is to always answer every question with yes, and then to figure out how they can do that without sacrificing too much profitability. They cannot be trusted with prices, just like a principal cannot be trusted with prices, because the principal is always thinking about the next payroll they need to meet. And so they're interested in bringing money in, more interested than they are in whether that revenue is actually profitable. So you have to have somebody else in the background who's running the control tower. I have very specific requirements for that person, a very specific job description. And that person takes a more objective view of the pricing, one that's not influenced too much by what the client wants to hear. And that's the most important job in the firm. So the most important person and the most difficult job, those two people work together to come up with a price that the client can accept that also doesn't sacrifice profitability. It's an entire system that's built on more than $300,000 worth of research over about 8 years. It's one I've developed extensively working around the world thinking through that, and it becomes very important. And part of it is recognizing that that person running the control tower internally, that is not a stepping stone to managing clients. Managing clients is not more important. It's not worth more. It's just a different job. So it's understanding the different roles at the agency. That's where it starts.
That's brilliant. Absolutely love that. That's great. And what you're not saying is that the person managing the clients can't decide and help the client to understand what services they should be buying.
For sure.
It's just that for the services that you are buying, this is the price. This is how it's priced, and that gets dictated, prescribed.
Right. Yeah, because if that client person is not capable of growing the account, then they're not a good account person, because they are really good salespeople, right? But really good salespeople cannot be trusted with pricing.
Yeah, brilliant, super. And so we're going to come on to how people can learn more about you, David, and how they can connect with you. But the final thing I'd just like our audience to leave with is for you to just, I guess, give a bit of inspiration for them about what their business could look like. So, agency owners out on the front line have it tough. They're getting battered and bruised every day by staff and by clients, by the market and competitors. When they're coming onto sessions like this, they're coming on to get inspired and get that injection about how they can actually build a better business. So what I'd like to ask you is, what does that better business look like for you? So when you've seen an agency that you would say that is a fantastic agency, what qualifies them as a fantastic, thriving agency?
That's a really interesting question. The book I just finished and that was published about 3 months ago, called The Business of Expertise, there's a chapter devoted to that in there, and it talks about a combination of 3 things. And if these 3 things are done well in combination with each other, then something magical happens. And that magic that happens is you really love your job. Those 3 things are making money, and not in any particular order, but making money, doing effective work, and having a great culture. Those seem to be like the 3 legs of the tripod, and then hanging from that in the middle is really enjoying your job. But to be more specific, your listeners might want to search for an article I wrote about a year ago called "If I Had Less Courage." If I Had Less Courage is the name of it. And it takes a very personal, almost a whimsical view of what the business would be like. And when I started writing that, and we can maybe put it in the show notes for your listeners, but when I started writing that, I wrote it like if I had more courage. And then it felt like it was negative, and it wasn't inspirational, and it was beating them up, and that wasn't my intent at all. So I decided to flip everything around and say, if I had less courage, this is what my business would look like, recognizing that a lot of people's businesses do look like that. And the obvious corollary then is, I need a little bit more courage. So I love working in this field. I'm a little disgusted with marketing as an industry. I feel like there's so much bullshit there, but I'm not at all disgusted with the people doing marketing. I love them. They're very smart. They're very funny. They're quite entrepreneurial in almost every case, and they're just really interesting people. But I long for them to not be awake at night worrying about their businesses. I just want them to be able to run businesses that it's like they need to make their businesses their bitch again. It's not that the business shouldn't be running them. They should be running the business. And somehow over time, the business becomes bigger than them, and it feels like it sort of throws them around like a dog with a toy. And that is not the world you should be living in. This business should be yours. You should be making very difficult, drastic decisions, whether that means you need to be less than half the people you have now, or you need to get rid of 2 clients, or you need to take a risk and be a little bit more innovative, whatever that means for you. It's like, I want clients to take their lives over again. That's the message for me.
Wow. Absolutely brilliant. Really, really love it. That's
Can we
great.
cuss on your thing? Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually mandatory if you hadn't sworn with it.
Okay, yeah. In the UK, like, yeah, it's never going to get published if we don't cuss a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. That's great. That idea of controlling your business, not that it can control you. And I actually prefer the word courage over risk, because I think risk taking suggests that you are doing something where you almost very little belief that it'll work.
Right.
It's the word risk suggests, like
almost reckless.
Yeah.
We don't want reckless.
No, but courage is saying that I'm not willing to live like this anymore. I'm not willing my business to give me the life it's giving me anymore. I want this better life, and I want it now. And it's not something I'm waiting for in the future. I want to make these decisions.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. Where can people find out more about you, David?
So there's a microsite for the book that I'd love people to check out. It's called expertise.is, expertise.is. And then my main consulting practice and where I publish content all the time is ReCourses.com, ReCourses. People there are about 26,000 firms, I think, signed up there that get the weekly email from me. It's free. It's full of insight. I'd be glad to welcome anybody that'd like to get that.
Super. And is that where your 40 advisors are as well? You mentioned about having this
That's
list.
right. In the frequently asked questions, there's a list of advisors there as well.
Yeah. Wonderful, David. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Get you on again. Thank you.
Bye.